Welcome to my tiny, weird retirement village room in Bucharest, Romania. And we are here for another episode of Feed the Trolls. We had big plans for this one. We're recording it just before the major starts. We were going to do a full major breakdown. Normally, we like to choose a specific topic and deep dive. But I said to Thorin, let's just do the major. Everyone else is doing the major. And then we got Astralis to throw us a bone, sort of. So we're changing everything. And we're going to be talking about br0vid. We're going to be talking about ESIC, all of that. We're jumping in. And Ne0kai is joining us, the South African turned Brit. You've probably seen him around. Lots of content going out. And you've already done your Pick'ems video. You've been grinding for the major already today, Ne0kai.
Yeah, I released it today. I kind of threw a couple of wild picks in there just to...
What was the most ridiculous one? Give us a tease. What was the most ridiculous one?
The one that I got like weird flack for, which I don't even think is that ridiculous, but I went Gamer Legion 03.
Oh, so 03? I have gone through. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
I have been going through too.
Okay.
So that was
what's even worse is they're all your boys from tier 2. They're all the people you're watching all the time. You don't even believe in them.
I'm literally mates with
That's how it goes.
I'm mates with like most
That's how it goes. The second he does a few real lands, he's like, you tier 2. Forget about you. It's a big time now.
Yeah. My whole point was like, bet Boomer Falcons are shit. Therefore, Gamer Legion are actually like, it's a faux thing. They're not actually that good. But yeah, I kind of do say in the video, like, I'm sorry, guys. Like, I love you, man. One of the best coaches around. Love all half the players, but it's not today,
it's a spicy video then. Fair play.
There we go. I'm learning from you, mate. There we go.
And by the way, shout out to whoever did come up with that term, br0vid 24 or whatever. Like, whoever did that, that's actually good. That's well-meaned, sir. You know.
I did think I have to give credit. Whoever is in charge of Heroic social team, I don't know if everyone saw, but actually today in Shanghai, they delivered all the shirts they made that say I'm unfit to play today.
It was for all the IGLs from the ones who did the protest, right? Yeah.
And each of them got an individual shirt. Damn, I want one of those shirts. What a clever way to just keep that meme running. Selling it now on their site. But that actually brings us to the conversation we're going to have. And I want to go all the way back to the Esports Integrity Council, or whatever it is, ESIC, which is what this conversation is going to be about. Here's my big concern. And Thorin, I'll pose this question to you to start. There is no independent real body governing Counter-Strike. Sure. We have this huge problem in sort of tier 2, tier 3. Kassad's tweeted about it. Everyone knows the betting, the match fixing. As useless as they've been in this situation, as useless as they've been in other situations, I have such a dark feeling about kind of just diving in and piling on them, because surely the really bad actors in the scene must be loving the fact that this organization is kind of just making a fool out of themselves.
See, here's the problem. You have stumbled there onto what is probably the biggest dilemma with ESIC. And I'm not even saying this to be sarcastic. Genuinely, it's the question that you have to ask, which is it actually better to have no ESIC, I'm not even trolling, than to have what we currently have as like, it says it's ESIC and it says it's the Integrity Coalition, but it doesn't seem like they can get most of the things over the line. And even worse, as you saw with the whole Hunden coach thing, it actually also seems like in some countries you can just get legal help and they basically have to back right off and sort of let you off with it. Like that one's not even a slap on the wrist, just sort of they reverse the ruling at that point. So the main problem is, this is where actually me and Richard Lewis, when they first launched ESIC, had a difference in opinion. His perspective was, we had nothing before, so it's better to at least have someone doing it, and then maybe over time you just hope it gets better and better and they get more legit and they figure out ways that they can enforce the rule. My problem was, and this is where I think I have a slightly subtle difference, is in theory I agree with that, but I also think you have to consider that a bit like the CSPPA, the player union, the other downside of having someone that says they're an Integrity Coalition independent or a player union is then they will also occupy the space of what could be a real one in the future. So the downside then becomes no one's ever going to make an ESIC if there's already an ESIC, but it just doesn't do a good job, but it occupies that space and has the branding. So I would just say, the way I wouldn't pile on them too much, because spoiler, I'm going to pile on them loads for the rest of this episode, just give you a little preview there. But the one thing I'll give them sort of like an olive branch at the beginning is, I do think, like you're implying, it's almost impossible for this body to actually exist as it sits. Like, one, how could it be independent? Because spoiler, I'm not going to pay for it to be run. No one watching this show is going to be paid for it. So who's paying those people all the full-time salaries? Remember, there's people who are lawyers and have to do court documents. There's people who have to go on. By the way, those investigations, this is why you should respect people like Richard Lewis when they do those stories. You'll never, ever make back the money on the amount of hours it takes to run that story down. Even if they paid you thousands at the end, it wouldn't be worth like 100 hours of work, would it? Like, do the maths. It's not going to jump. So unfortunately, the only incentive to actually do an organization like this either is one of the actors in the space pays you. It's implied when ESIC formed, I think initially ESL funded part of it. Or you have to genuinely be some Batman-esque lunatic who just wants to do it for the good of humanity and to save the space. And even though there might be a few people that might fit that Dark Knight archetype, I don't think there's many of them, and it's just Richard Lewis and me in it. Like, it's about it. So sadly, if you go all the way back to rewind, for what it is, here's the thing. Part of me feels like it is better than nothing, because occasionally there are people who do get punishments, and sometimes those punishments do hold up. Like, some of the coaches didn't push back with lawyers, and they did sit out the majors, and they did get the slap on the wrist. And certainly, by the way, I think coaches would think twice about cheating with the exploit of that again compared to what it used to be. So on some hand, they have done some good. My bigger worry, though, is it feels like every time there's something like this, where it's like, those ones are more I can take it or leave it. These are the ones where I feel like this is the only body who can surely act now. If they don't act, who will? And so when they sort of half act like this, it makes me also have a bit of a sinking feeling about like, this is just someone scamming like a spot at a tournament. What if this was like some major roster eligibility or some shit? Remember, this rule, as soon as you open that door, could be used in other tournaments. So that's the big concern for me is, in a way, like, here's the most cynical way to look at the whole Astralis topic. So at the end, all they've basically done, guys, is fine Astralis 15,000. Right, here's how Thorin, being very cynical, would now phrase. New rule. The rule now is if you have 15,000, you can just insert whatever fifth player you want. There you go. It just costs $15,000. So do you want to buy Ziwu? Oh, no, you haven't got him registered. Got 15,000? Now you've got Ziwu in your team for the next blast. That's the problem I have. I feel like eventually there's a saying like that, by the way, which goes when the only punishment is a fine, it's not actually like, you're not allowed to not do that. You just have to be wealthy enough to do it, is the saying. Yeah. It's a bit like the famous one about, like, if you smoke, it sets the alarm off. It costs $250. Spoiler, loads of rich people would just like, there's 1,000, get the fuck out of my face, and start lighting up the big cigar. So that's what I worry about. I worry that this is going to become a scenario where, in the case of Astralis, they can afford the 15K. And by the way, if it had all worked out, it didn't, and they'd gotten cadiaN into that bloody, it wasn't Royal Arena, but a bigger, probably worth 15,000 at that point. So yeah. I do worry about some of this. I think it's actually a way bigger topic than people realize. There's a lot of sort of abstract things in this one, I think.
I mean, in South African law, precedent always takes place, right? So if you've never heard the story before, whatever the ruling is, that's kind of the precedent. And then thereafter, any case that comes in after that, they judge it according to precedents. And I'm pretty sure law, even though we all have different legal systems, it kind of works the same. That's what they've done here, right? So if we go all the way back, let's go through this scenario, if you like, about what happened, which was basically Astralis announces out of the blue, cadiaN's going to be playing for them because Bro is unfit to play or unwell. They give no other information. Bro's agent then tweets out and says, well, actually, Bro's just fine. And we find out that he's trialing for other teams. But Astralis puts cadiaN there anyway, and the tournament organizer BLAST kind of goes, well, we just believe Astralis. And that was where it was left. Do you think it should have stopped there? I mean, was that really where the situation actually needed to have been handled?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the way I look at it, I think there's three main actors in this whole scenario. You got Astralis, you got BLAST, you got ESIC, right? And for me, and I know, Duncan, you might disagree here in the one point that I'm going to go with, but I actually think that there's two guys who are the main ones. It's Astralis and ESIC. I think BLAST, the only thing that they really do wrong is that they're just like too trustworthy here, right? Astralis approached them, say that Bro it's essentially burnout, is essentially what they're saying that he's got.
Oh, right.
Has to take this step away and, medical reasons. And then we kind of get this like hints at it being sort of mental health reasons. But then, as Sam, you were talking about, it's the agent immediately be like, this is not true. He's trialing. Let's get this going. He wants to join another team. He's on the bench, but he's ready to go. And he's really excited for the next step in his career after, this last year in Astralis, right? So you've kind of got multiple different ways to go about it. But the way I always look at it, I think the main thing that BLAST do wrong is that they're just too trustworthy, which I don't think is inherently a bad thing, right? Normally, taking things at face value is okay. I think in the case of Astralis, we know that they are a side who, definitely made a few bad decisions in the past and are not,
just a few?
Yeah, you know what I mean? That's the nice way of putting it. They're definitely a side who are an organization who, putting it lightly, are more than happy to skew the rules and skew the kind of whatever's in place to their own advantage. I think BLAST are just too trustworthy here for me. But the big things when you look at it is like, the one thing that I look at with Astralis is kind of, like you were saying, Thorin, is like, they know that there's this monetary thing that they can now just pay this. So for them, is that ever going to stop them going forward, or actually any like team inside of the top 20? I don't think so, right? They're going to be like, oh yeah, fuck it, like who cares? So it sets really bad precedents for me going forward of like, how do ESIC, let's say this happens again, because of the public backlash, are they then going to completely pivot 180 and crush somebody else for doing this in the future, if it does happen in the future? And then it weighs up another argument talking about where is actually the middle ground here and what is actually should be happening. I think the way ESIC have gone about it, though, there's a few things that I really hated about how they came forward with the whole announcement of this. The main one for me that I always come back to is why in any point is where they place in the tournament at any point part of how they're going to be disciplined here, because it poses the first big question is, what happens if Astralis win the whole fucking tournament? Like, what's the point?
Yeah, the weirdest thing about that comment, by the way, is you're almost like dissing cadiaN then. It's like, well, if you'd have actually been better, you'd have won a game, then we'd have had to do something. Talking about, like,
if
what?
you lot weren't shit, we actually would have punished you properly. But it does make me question, though, like, what would the punishment have been if Astralis were actually good at Counter-Strike at this tournament, right? And then would it have been a little bit more of a fairer judgment that we're all saying? But then you've got the other side, when then you've got like Astralis's response to the statement, and then Astralis come forward. It's a very small response with not a lot in it. There's one thing that I did sort of hate in a way. You know, November, for those who don't know, is sort of men's mental health month. Hence why I've got this very terrible stash going. I'm doing a bit of November right now, raising a bit of money, whatnot. And they've got at the bottom mentioning, like, we're going to give this 15K to a mental health charity, basically insinuating that bro is sort of a mental health issue. His agent is literally saying this is not the truth.
No, that's gross.
So it just feels like they're using such a horrible thing that affects a lot of people, especially in video games. And using it as a way of being like, look, we're actually the good guys. We're giving 15K to charity. ESIC have said we've got to give this charity, but we're picking mental health. It's like, why? Like, you know, why have you picked this one, and why are you basically insinuating?
Shall I tell you what? Shall I play devil's advocate and say what I think they're thinking? So here's the problem. They already did this. This is literally what they did in 2020 when we went online, and famously Glaive came and he brought a doctor's note that said, I'm burned out and I have to have time off. Now, separately, I believe Zipnix didn't even have to get the doctor's note, but then following the wake of that, then Zipnix took a few months off too. Now, interestingly, at the time, we all made the point on by the numbers, like, but why do, essentially, if you want to say in every PR messaging, like, we love our players, they're like family to us, why would you need the doctor's note to believe the guy when he says, like, I'm having mental problems or I'm burned out? Right? Now, they kept falling back to this thing where, like, but under Danish law, legally, we have to have the doctor. That's all well and good, but we all know there are players that have taken time off who didn't have a doctor's note. So, first of all, you're hiding behind the law on that one, when we all know there's, like, a sort of, like, normal approach you could take. And then secondly, one of the reasons they also did that, though, Neo, is because what they then did was, then when me and Richard questioned whether this was legit, like, for example, I actually knew behind the scenes that actually Astralis was trying to sell the whole team to Cloud9. So I was even wondering, like, is it actually even that he is burned out? Maybe he just wants some time off, or maybe now there's not events, he wants to just chill a little bit. And when we had the audacity to speculate, this is why they put that in there, mate. Because the reason they've put that in there is not only one, it's genius to imply it's mental health, because that's not something you can see externally. You have to just believe the person. So already, spoiler, I don't believe anything that comes out of Astralis, but normal people will just go benefit the doubt. I assume you won't lie about that. Spoiler, they would lie about that. And then secondly, it allows the secondary component they haven't activated yet, which is that's the booby trap. Now, if you come out there and you go, hey, it's bullshit that you did like some fake thing, they go, hey, how can you dare to criticize his mental health? You can't know what's going on with him. This is serious, bro. But as you say, what's actually nailed this whole thing, the closest to a smoking gun, is this whole bro agent thing. Because normally that's the one part wouldn't come out. Like, maybe behind the scenes you'd hear a story like, oh, it's not true, actually. Like, we've heard he's not even injured. But that would just be hearsay and speculation. And one, a lot of people wouldn't comment on that publicly. And then two, that makes it way more like plausible doubt. You know, you sort of go, well, if it is, then. But the fact that in this rare case, the agent basically said, like, he isn't ill at all. Like, two things. One, I'd say that makes it more fucked up that you then later claim it's some mental health thing. And like you say, you didn't say that, but the fact that that's the org you give the 15,000 to makes it seem extremely likely because of how people understand, like, thematic components. And then also, to me, I do think in that scenario, you are just the person where it's like, the player himself was never going to say anything either way, because one day he might want to play for Astralis again or some other day. So I think this is the only way. It's just the agent, smartly, by the way, realizing this actually will, like, kill his sort of stock for trade right now. If people think, one, he's not in the team, but two, he's injured as well. No one will try and get him. And obviously we want him, I assume at the time, to maybe even play the major or go to another team. And then the last thing I would say is this. The other reason why this is so sus is specifically because of the precedent in the past, which is, remember, the company that owns BLAST, Refresh, or the other way around. I can't remember which one it is. But I think maybe it's the other way around. Maybe Refresh only owns Astralis. I can't remember which one they are, but they used to basically Refresh used to own Astralis and Blast, including in the Blast Pro Series days, and then now they separated officially. But that makes it look dodgy when this sort of a thing happens. It looks like there's one rule for Astralis, the people who used to be your actual team, and one for another. Because I will say that's the last part. Do you want to know the real reason why those IGLs did that public protest and didn't do the media day? Because they told me this isn't even the first time this has happened. They said in the past there's been teams that wanted to bring a player like this and said, look, this is our real lineup. We're never going back to the old lineup. We're actually going to use this guy. I know we registered one day late, but can we get this guy in? And they were all told, no, you can't do it. And so they didn't do it. So I can't tell if that means that this is like this punishment would only happen to Astralis, and someone else would really be told if they turned up, hey, he's not playing, he's not registered. Or if it was actually that classic saying, like, better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Like, maybe if you just do it and you turn up and that is the only play, maybe they have to figure out a way to make it work. So I actually wonder even about the precedent. Like, part of me almost, even though I hope it doesn't, part of me wishes a different team, totally unrelated, I don't know, Complexity or something, had a similar thing tomorrow. And then, by the way, let's make it even sexier. Maybe they're signing like Zemu, and so they would win the game if he joined in. So then let's test it out. Let's see what happens. Because I also think that's a weird thing. If you're going to say, but since nothing, it didn't affect them, they said something like it didn't materially affect the tournament because they didn't win, basically. Yeah. My question is, then why not tell us what would have happened if they'd have won? Like, maybe tell us, like, if they'd have won, though, we would have docked them, or you'd be, I don't know, you wouldn't be allowed to play at the next Blast. Or so. I don't know what it would be, but to me, this left more questions than answers, this whole thing.
Yeah, we need to know what the actual punishment is if you
what is it?
Break this rule and then actually do something with it. If you weren't just shit at the game, what would your actual punishment be? Because, like, if a team, I mean, this feels like it sets a bad precedent in the sense of, like, what happens if, like, G2 are going through these changes, they're losing Ne0kai, they have a roster lock, and then last minute they're like, oh, hang on, guys, we're actually just going to bring in, like, Spinks, by the way. Like, and what happens if it's actually a big change?
By the way, we're back in the day when Ne0kai didn't used to be one of the teams in ECS, famously, Simple, multiple times stood in for other teams when he was like the best player in the world and carried the game. Like, he would just play like an online BO3 and drop like 50 and then go like, see ya. It's like, what if that's the sub? Like, the sub can't actually be someone who's way better than our real player. That's even worse.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go on a bit of a long one here, but I have 3 points. So the first one is, I'm actually going to play devil's advocate for Blast here. Obviously, Astralis didn't say in the beginning what was wrong with Bro. They said he couldn't play. Yeah. Okay, they never once, they didn't actually, and then they used the excuse that they couldn't say anything because of Danish law. But if I'm Blast and you come to me and you go, hey, we're going to bring cadiaN in, there is a part of me that you say one of our players isn't well, so we'll bring in cadiaN. There is a part of me that goes, okay, that's a big name. That's going to pull views. That's going to sell tickets. It's going to make a really good show. I mean, I could kind of understand why you would go, we believe you, he's probably not well. Because in your mind, you're like, well, why would you lie, right? But also that's great for us. So one, there's a pulling power that cadiaN brings. Also, this man is like haunting me because he comes up in every episode since I've worked with him. It's very frustrating. But there he is. But then my second point that I wanted to make was actually on how the agent handled that whole situation. So ironically, I'm doing like another series where I'm talking to sports psychologists, and Bro's agent is a sports psychologist. It's like part of the service he offers as a player agent is he's also a sports psychologist. And I reached out to him around the time this was all happening to talk. And straight away he said to me, I'm not going to talk about the Bro stuff that's going on. Like, I don't talk about players. It's not going to be a conversation we had. And I said, cool, I completely understand. But I loved the way he handled it, because he actually never once outright came out and said, hey, Astralis is lying. He simply put out a tweet saying, Bro is very fit and healthy and looking to find a new team to play. It was the way he worded it was like so incredibly smart. And it was...
He didn't address Astralis at all, right? He just sort of inferred that. That's what you were saying, right? Yeah.
He said it, and the moment that happened, everyone kind of... And I mean, I think he actually tweeted it before they announced that cadiaN was stepping in. They'd announced Bro's benching, if I'm not mistaken, was when he made the tweet about Bro is healthy and fit. So he obviously knew what was coming. And even since then, obviously with Bro having to step in for the RMRs, the way he's handled it, if you watch, like, Bro's obviously kept his mouth shut, which he has to as a player. But even the agents has always said, Bro is stepping up. He's super professional with the ESIC thing. He said, I'm glad that they've seen through this, but my players, they handled it in a very classy manner, which I really liked. And I thought it was a really smart way to kind of get people to pay attention without necessarily throwing mud at one another. But the final point I kind of want to make, and it's a question I suppose that I'll pose to both of you. There was so much like noise around this because of the IGLs all standing up, obviously, for that media day. For those watching who don't know, they all turned out and said, we're not pitching up at media day, sort of standing together as a group. They released a public statement saying that they weren't happy with this. Do you think that ESIC ran to get an answer out before the major because they are feeling the pressure? When it was announced that this was being handed over to them, they're already under so much scrutiny. They're already criticized so much that they kind of rush to put something out to try and make it appear like they're doing whatever it is they're supposed to be doing. But in actual fact, they know that there's nothing they can do now because this whole thing has happened. And other than sort of giving Astralis a slap on the wrist and saying naughty boys, like they don't have any real power. Because that was kind of the feeling I got, which was, hey, we're going to release this statement and, you know, look, we've actually done something. But for me, Neo, it was kind of more of a, we don't actually have any power to do anything here because the tournament has happened and they've played.
I think the worst thing, unfortunately, the worst thing for ESIC was actually just them coming through with some sort of action because it, like you said, I think for me, it just proved that this is a disciplinary board or whatever that just actually does have no power. I mean, we already touched on like how Hunden, the second you lawyer up, you basically escape everything, right? Immediately. I think, was it Zeus as well said the same thing? One of the other Brazilian coaches who got banned and he was actually like innocent, but he got banned for a major or for
I think Peacemaker maybe
Peacemaker, that was it,
yeah.
Right? And he was actually innocent in all fairness, and he just lawyered up to prove it. But you know, obviously in Hunter's case, he most definitely wasn't, right? But all you have to do is put a bit of legal pressure on it. You know, I think for me the issue of ESIC is that we all just know now that they're incredibly flimsy because you can just lawyer up, and it's so easy to get around. Or in this case, you know, if you're Astralis, you get 15K fine. You're laughing, you know what I mean? It's just pocket change to them. So they just don't care at all. And the issue is that I think for ESIC, what we've seen of them since the second they came in towards the scene is that the only people who actually end up getting fucked over and like actually punished by ESIC are people who are small. Like I think about those guys in Australia who are not even betting on their own games, or betting on other games in Australia, but got banned on the match fixing. I think
that's also what's given them such bad will, right? People feel like if you're nobody, they crush you. By the way, that's what I can tell you. Players think the same thing about BLAST. Like what I just said earlier, their implication was if you'd have been the worst team, like the smallest org at BLAST, and you'd have rocked up like, hey, we're going to field this guy, they'd be like, you're not. In fact, you're forfeiting the game if you don't get the right. But their perception was because it's Astralis and we're in Denmark, of course they had to do it. I know what you mean. Like the best analogy ever is if people remember the most famous in 2008, that like banking financial crisis. Famously, almost every banker in America, the biggest banks in the world, none of them went to prison. No one got a single thing. There was one guy and it was like one Asian guy that just owned like a family bank that didn't. He obviously just wasn't like a made man. He wasn't hooked into the whole. So he got completely crushed. I think he went to prison and everything. So I know what you mean, Neil. Like the problem in that scenario is like, how can I, in this analogy, like, you know, basically be like hung, drawn, and quartered for like nicking a fucking cake, and then you're just like hostile takeover, doing corrupt shit and taking the whole factory, and you get nothing. Like people feel like it's a two-tier system. I feel like,
no, it's true. I do feel like if you're small, you get fucked over here. The one thing, just to touch on like the agent thing that I actually did love. One of the annoying things, I think not enough people have seen his statement because it only had like one retweet from Graham from Messioso and like 50 likes, right? But he actually quote retweeted the ESIC thing. And his statement, I love it. Whether he means it or not, it's like so subtle. I feel like he's digging at Astralis. He was like, he was saying, just letting you know that like, so Alex has been fit and healthy as shared previously before the event. There's never been anything but, good on Alex for stepping up and helping out his team when they needed him. And then he's like, big respect to the in-game leaders and all the people who fought against and made a stance on Alex's behalf.
Chef's kiss,
The power of the players is big when coming together. And then he just does a brilliant quote when he said, and I came across a very good quote. He says, honesty is a power that very few people can handle. And I just love it. Like, it just feels for me like it's just like...
It's basically saying the lying, guys.
Yeah.
He's basically saying the lying. There you go.
Astralis are lying. I love it, Ignore them, exactly. So the way I look at it is like, obviously, Astralis are obviously the one with the malintent here. The bad actors.
That actually is a masterpiece. That's like you can only make it end it. It's like you'd have to end it like, and also shout out to Heroic, the one Danish org you can really trust to do that. How much more than those are you going to make this, mate? I know
it's brilliant, but the way
did it also secretly in the statement put like an acronym of the first letters like fuck Astralis, like on all the sentences or something.
That would actually be brilliant if it did, like all like the capital letters just say like fuck Astralis or something. Exactly. But sadly not. That would have been incredible. But the way I look at it as well, like for me, I feel like I'm with you, Sam, in the sense that I actually don't really blame BLAST as much here. I just think the only issue that they really have is that they were like just overly trustworthy. They kind of just took it at face value and self-admittedly, Blast, like we didn't look into this enough. They said that he was ill and we just took their word for it, kind of thing. You know, that's our fault. And fair play to them for coming forward. Because I think a lot of people would just be like, "Oh, fuck him!" Like this will go away. By the way,
that's something though. Here's one thing I'll say that no one ever brings up in this topic is. Like, this is where even Astralis are getting a bit dodgy here. Because what they're doing now, if you notice, is they're invoking, like, legal standards and implying, like, anyone's ever going to court. Like, first of all, no one's going to court for any of this. So, like, as soon as you do that, what you're almost doing there is you're sort of going, well, I am an arsehole, but what I did isn't illegal. It's like, yeah, okay, it's a weird opening gambit, but okay. Now, the reason I bring this up is I don't believe anyone, whether they'd played or not, was ever taking this court. Like, I don't think Astralis was ever going to court with Blast going, hey, they had just to prove that he was ill and it's illegal in Denmark to show doctor's notes. So we got, like, true, if you went there, I'm sure they'd probably win. But what's weird about this case is, one, I feel like if you were, again, the smaller team, if you were the Mongols and you were at this tournament, when they then tell you 1 second before the game starts, like, look, you can't play him, it's in our rules. You wouldn't then go, stop the whole tournament, see you in court, mate. You'd just bring in the player and play the game. So first of all, I don't think very else this would ever happen. And then also, I do sort of feel like in that particular case, that's where Blast, in a way, can't just do the legal standard. Because I can tell you, ESL would just sort of pressure you with non-legal methods, like if you want to play this game and not get forfeited, you better get the right players in now. But the issue I think in this particular case is I do feel like it's probably true. It's probably true that if you have this note, you would be excused in a Danish court. But then in that scenario, the obvious question I can ask you now is, can't every single team just use that exploit now? Like, logically, Blast aren't doctors. They can't go, hey, we've got to take him to a separate room and see him. Oh, yeah, you're right. This is right. He is. But they're going to always have to just trust that it's true. In fact, the worst thing about this rule is it's almost a good faith rule. You're just supposed to tell the truth as to whether your player's actually injured or not. And it turns out everyone in all of history could have just lied the whole time. I mean, by the way, if you're cynical, they all could have. It's just that, believe it or not, this actually implies to me, and I think it's true, I actually think most orgs wouldn't lie. I know it sounds wild because you think they're just cynical, but it actually seems, if you look even at the behavior of the other IGLs, most orgs wouldn't do this. So I actually think in a weird way, it's actually the fact it's specifically Astralis sort of has the gall to do it. Means they're going to get away with it as far as I can tell, because they're sort of pushing the fact that, as we're seeing, you'd have to, thanks to their statement, almost openly be saying, you're lying, he isn't mentally ill. It's all fact, which is, who the hell wants to say that? Yeah. And then two, if this ever did go to court, I've no doubt they would win it. Like, again, it's all inside someone's mind. Who the hell can know? By the way, for all we know, I don't think so. For all we know, secretly, that agent lied and he was really ill and all the rest of it. Now, spoiler, I think if you know Astralis, they would have just made the bro guy said something publicly. But that's neither here nor there, I guess.
I mean, maybe he was, but there is a part of me that kind of thinks...
Was he actually at the event, by the way, Sam? Did he come to the event itself? Do you know?
No, bro wasn't at the event, but he obviously
wasn't there at all. Right.
No. I think what bugs me about this whole situation is I think it's really shitty from Astralis's point of view. The fact that they benched bro and then came out saying, oh, well, you know, he's unfit to play or unwell to play. Yeah. And the insinuations, because it's his career on the line, right? He's now trying to get other teams to pick him up. And I really actually feel quite strongly that if his agent hadn't have made that public statement, it could have really negatively impacted his career, because a lot of other organizations are going, oh, hold on, you know, like, is there a problem here? Are we going to pick you up and you're not going to be able to play? Using him as a scapegoat for me just felt like a really dirty way to behave. And the fact that we now know that he was actually sort of trialing for other teams and stuff, I'm going to put my head on the chopping block and say, I don't think...
Wasn't there even a thing, Sam, where someone said that exactly at the moment, like they even did this like thing, he was playing like Face It or something. Didn't someone say something mad like that? Like he was actually like playing something like that, right?
On the night it came out, he had 12 Face It pods leading until 3 a.m. 12 in a row. It was like, come on now, burn out.
This is my thing, because I was like, I don't think the agent was lying when he said he was fit and well. I think Astralis quite happily went, hey, we have cadiaN now. We're going to throw this kid under the bus to get cadiaN to play. And who gives a shit about the rest of his career, which is already for a Counter-Strike player a pretty small window. And that's the thing that bugs me the most, is this has happened. And yes, fine. Like in the bigger scheme of things, they didn't do very well at the tournament. So like as ESIC said, well, they didn't exactly get far. And obviously bro ended up playing for them for the RMRs and whatever, all's well that ends well. But it could have ended very differently for this young man. And there's a part of me where I'm like, why are we and I think the IGLs did, but this committee that's meant to stand up, this council and protect players, holy shit, you need to be looking at this going, it might not have played out the way that you wanted, Astralis, but shit, the things that you were doing here like had a direct impact on someone's livelihood, like unacceptable. Like, there is no $15,000 punishment is not nearly enough. That's also probably a tax write-off for them because now it's a charity donation. So
there's probably some angle like that. Sure.
Oh no, you're right. Probably,
The whole thing bugs me and it worries me because if we do not have some sort of committee that can stand up and say, I mean, even the IGLs of all the biggest teams couldn't make a difference here. That concerns me in a big way.
Yeah, you notice that in itself is telling, Sam, because I even put at this point, look, they did a protest, but it was just like essentially a protest, like public, like, hey, we don't like this. But all they protested was they skipped the media day. They didn't do what you'd actually want, which is you just say we won't play. Yeah. If the other 7 teams go, we refuse to start the tournament. But like, here's the sad thing. The reason why I'd like that to happen is it'd at least make BLAST have to make a decision. They can pick one way or the other, but in this scenario, it means even the players themselves can't go that far. Like they can just sort of show, hey, we don't like this, but we will play the game if we have to. By the way, I even think, I'm not even joking, there's a greater than 0% chance this is also because it's cadiaN, by the way, Sam. Like, first of all, Twists just had to put up with cadiaN for like 3 months. So he already doesn't like him, I can tell you. Secondly, like some of the other ones, some people don't, I know some blow people's minds. Some people cadiaN rubs the wrong way. I know that sounds crazy, including, I know, other players on other teams. So I also think part of it was like, a 5% fuck cadiaN angle too. It was that too. Like, I'd like to see what would happen if it had been Glaive coming back, some legendary guy we all love. Like, it was cadiaN, so I also feel like they were like, fuck cadiaN.
I do. For me, the one thing that really kind of like worries me a little bit, kind of touching on what you were saying, Sam, about like how they essentially just threw Bro under the bus, right? This is a guy, 22 years of age, pretty, in the infancy stages of his career, right? This is his first looking properly in towards tier 1, right? So you
relate to him, do you? He's got that O's, the third letter, just getting to the top finally.
Yeah, exactly. Me and him are one and the same. Brothers from other mothers, some would say.
Working with the most old school Danish CS institution. I see where it's going. Okay.
What can I say? Okay. But like, the way I look at it as well, like for him, it's like you got the thing of like, if you're another org or another org is trialing him, the big question is like, what is this guy? Are we going to have him for like 9 months? Or is he then going to get burnout and not be able to play for us? Can he actually cope at the tier 1?
I actually even thought of that, Neo. It's actually even worse if you're a young player and you get the burnout. Yeah, we can all understand if Device and Glaive get it. They're at the end of their careers. You're right. That might actually just like cripple your career before it even gets a chance to run.
Yeah, I mean, like he's barely got a chance to play properly at a top level, right? He only joined Astralis in February of this year, right? And they're already stating that he's got burnout and that he's unfit to play, right? So if you're another org who doesn't know the full story, you're thinking, well, like, why would I pick him up? Like, if we want to be tier 1 or if we already are a tier 1 team, he can't handle it there, and he's in his own language. If we're in a non-Danish, an English-speaking team, can he handle it here? It's even more pressure. So I worry about that. And then you've got the other thing of like, if I was like, because for those who don't know, Bro came through the academy system. He'd been on Astralis Academy 2 years ago on the talent team, right? So if I'm now a player on Astralis talent, I must be thinking like, fuck, these guys have no loyalty at all. They will throw you under the bus straight away. So like that for me is like the real thing that I hate about it. It's like they've kind of like, if his agent does anything, exactly that, everyone would have been saying, well, Bro's just never going to make it in tier 1. Don't test him. He's just going to, unfortunately kind of rot away in the online scene and never going to make it back up again, right? And he's a player who we know has talent, we know can play, and he's young, so he can be molded under the right IGL and all the rest. And they just did not care about discarding him, which, as we all now know, was a complete lie. So that's the thing that really rubs you the wrong way around it. It's like, this is a guy who's been with this organization since like early 2022 or whatever, right? So they've known him for years, and they brought him up from being like, I think he was like 19 when he first joined, right? So a kid when he first joins, there's just no loyalty there at all for it to nearly even kind of like, maybe not, but you never know the ramifications of a statement like this, of how much it could actually affect his career down the line.
And he was also playing really well for Astralis. I think that's the thing that bugs me the most when they
he wasn't doing anything wrong. Like,
he was actually playing bloody well.
Tough roles as well.
No, by the way, he basically got fired because Stown didn't have a good time or something like that. It's one of those, like, fire the defender because the striker isn't scoring goals scenario. Like, it's a bit bizarre. Also, by the way, I also think it couldn't have been almost more comedic. This was like something out of fucking Monty Python, Sam, where also at the same event, Device then was like, I'm feeling a bit actually ill myself. And then after that, they were like, oh, and actually cadiaN's ill as well. Like, well, that's rich, isn't it? It's almost like we could use subs for these. Are you trolling me right now? Yeah. When I can't even believe they hit send on those tweets, by the way. Like, what are you doing? Bro, just tanking at this point. The one thing you can't ever do is imply, like, it'd be good if I had a sub who could come and play instead of me. You're already abusing that rule, you idiot. You're already doing that. And also, I'll just put this out there. This might blow your mind. Why are players from Astralis publicly disclosing their medical situation? I was told in a statement by Astralis that's illegal under Danish law.
True.
Damn, there it is.
It's weird how that works, isn't it? Just, what's good when it suits you, it works. When it doesn't, it's not legal protections. Weird.
So the next question is, what should have been the punishment for Astralis? Because that is the thing. We've all said we're not happy with this punishment, but what should the punishment have been? I saw, and I feel horrible to whoever this is because I'm about to speak about what I thought was quite a clever idea, but obviously I can't remember who you were. Talking about how...
Steal it then, don't worry about yours.
Giving credit. It was, and there's no control, we can't do this. Valve would have to step in, but they were talking about removing Valve ranking points. Like that should be your punishment, is that you start the next year. And I was like, damn, that is actually...
that's not
like,
bad.
That's bloody good. I love that. Obviously, it's never going to happen, but they were like, you start the year on the back foot now. Sorry.
No, the reason why that's like a clever angle is because obviously that should be the ultimate incentive, because actually the Valve ranking point is everything next year, basically. So you're right. That's sort of like in Formula 1 or something. Like you start 2 spots back or something, you lose some points or something. That's massive. That's everything. Yeah, that's, by the way, that's way better than money. Like we say, they could. The joke is they could make a T-shirt like "Was Broil" and sell it for $15,000 and then just cover the fucking thing. It's how bad these orgs are. So I think a points angle is a good angle. That would make you think twice about it too.
Yeah,
I shouldn't have credited to the stranger on the internet. I should have just pretended it was my idea. Damn.
No, I think you're right though. I think for me as well, like, the way I look at it is like, especially because like in the question of like how do you punish them, I think the Valve ranking one is, I think when, like we kind of touched on, when you put like a monetary value on that, that is just like a paywall to break a rule, right? You can't do that. It has to be something that will actually affect them. And this basically
see an ecosystem that features Falcons. Logically, they could just do whatever they want now, can't they? They can just fucking got all the money. It's fucking. They should just bring different players every event. Like, hey, you like Monacy? He's in now. There you go. There's 15K. Get the fuck out of my face.
That's what I when I was thinking about the punishment, it's like one of two ways. Either but I don't really think that's possible, because you're then basically putting blame on BLAST. Is it if you say like Astralis can't go to your next event? And I think that then puts the more blame on BLAST, which I'm still in the camp that I don't think they take as much. I just think they were like a little bit thick in terms of like their approach. They should have done a lot more due diligence. They just didn't, right? Which I think they just took things at face. So then you're kind of punishing BLAST. I think Valve ranking is the only way, but it's so weird because you look at ESIC in terms of like all the random severities of their bans, right? You've got like, the NA players who obviously got banned. I mean, never knew what happened with them. The Aussie guys, like I mentioned, but then, and I will credit, unlike Sam, right? I saw a tweet by Zeus who spoke about ESIC. They banned Robin.
Proper sourcing, we appreciate that.
What can I say? Yeah. Because he mentioned that ESIC banned Robin for using the coach bug once, despite losing.
I think his was one where he didn't even check anything. He just like looked around for a second and then he went off and they lost the game, like you said. Got mega wrecked.
They lost 13-1 and he literally did it for like one round. And
but he still had to miss like one major or something, right? It's actually the major they won.
Exactly, yeah. So he got he got quite a big ban for it. True. So it's like it's so weird with ESIC where it's like if we're using the thing of like results, then it doesn't make any sense because Robin lost 13-1 when he used that coach bug. So he was obviously like shit at using the coach bug as well. Didn't know how to use it properly. Should have got tips from like Hunden. But it's like, it's so weird. Like I feel like for me, like Valve ranking is the only thing that actually makes sense. But then it's the question of how much do you dox them and then you've got to set a precedent. So this is where like the biggest thing for me, and the issues of always of ESIC, and they always like to hide behind like lawyers were getting involved, or I guess with the North American one they spoke about that the FBI were getting involved, so we can't talk anymore. Which is like insane.
Mulder and Scully just chasing them down. I believe in the match fixing. I've never seen it myself. I don't know if I can. I'm skeptical of it.
But the thing with ESIC, the thing that like I just hate about it the most is just like we just need them to be like super open and clear of like, if you do this is your punishment. This level of severity, this is what you get. We just don't get that with them. So it's like it just feels like whoever's in charge of the case on the day is like, how much of a dick do I feel today? Like,
it genuinely feels, Theo, like they take a massive wheel of fortune, spin wheel, they spin it, and it. Let's see what, like, like opening a case for you, Zoomers and Gen Alpha, when you see what you're getting inside the case. Gold. Exactly. And then obviously, in this scenario, it's about to land on, like, be docked, like, lose a match for Astralis. And then they go, I've got to use my medical exemption, get out of jail free card. And then they're like, you can use that once per tournament. There you go, that's activated. They don't lose points now. Like, okay, how does this work?
So it's so weird for me, because it feels like, like it literally just feels like whoever's on the case on the day is how severe the punishment is. You can either like, you know, ban the entire Australian scene forever, or we could maybe give them 15.
But it's weird what you're talking about with the coach bug. If people don't know, people who did it with one incident sometimes missed a major. Then some people did like 7 incidents and missed 2. It's like it didn't scale appropriately. I know what you mean. It almost felt like it was arbitrary for each one. There wasn't like a proper like
Zona. I think Zona did like something like ridiculous, like 400
someone did like
maps.
2.5 maps or something.
Yeah. Zona I know was the worst because I can't remember. Yeah, he rebranded, tried to come back under Meccano Gun. I was like, I'm not Zona anymore. It's like, mate, you're still him. Like, you can't just rename yourself. So that's the weird, and he nearly got away with it as well, weirdly. So it's like,
sound like a Scooby-Doo episode. He nearly got away with it, but it wasn't for that bloody ESIC.
Yeah. If it wasn't for somebody like, hang on, you look like Zona actually. No, I'm Meccano Gun actually now. But it's like, for me, it's like we just need somebody to be clear. And I think as well, this is something that a lot of people talk about. I feel like it shouldn't be this like third party. We need somebody at Valve to be like just one person to be in charge of like competitive integrity, who is like liaison with ESIC and like lets them do the work. But ultimately, it's Valve making the decision because it just feels like, for me, with putting ESIC in charge, like it's so random what sort of punishment you could get. Like we said, we could see another team do this in like a year's time, and they could get banned from a tournament, banned from multiple tournaments, VRS 100 points docked, and maybe not even make it to the RMR because of that or whatever. So it's so weird. Like you just never know what level of punishment you're going to get depending on the day. Like it could have been like a week from now or whatever, and the punishment was 10 times severe, just depending on who was on the case.
Do you think it's also because my understanding is there's not a lot of money running through ESIC, right? It is a non-profit.
So sure.
Okay, so now you've got a situation where, let's be honest, Astralis has had their run in here before. Maybe not Astralis with ESIC, but Hunden was involved, and from what I understand, from what was released, Astralis behind the scenes was doing a lot to help him. Sure. It wasn't only the coaching bug; it was leaking heroic strat book to Astralis. And he lawyered up. And things worked out. So there must be a part of ESIC where they're going, okay, we only have X amount of funds. And I think maybe this is something for people watching that they don't understand, is that when you go down this path of whether it be investigative journalism like Thorin and Richard do, or whether it be more of the legal thing, you have to dot every I and cross every T.
Yes.
And it is a very expensive exercise. This isn't something that you can do for free. It takes a huge amount of time, a huge amount of money has to be spent. You have to have legal professionals look at stuff and double check. So there's a huge cost involved. I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I worry that ESIC looked at this and was like, shit, we have to make a ruling, but we know Astralis, what they do. They love to play with their lawyers. They're going to, and it's not about taking people to court, because everyone knows this isn't going to court. No one gives a shit about esports. It's just about sending lawyers letters, because then you have to respond with lawyers letters. And all of that costs money. You can tie people up in a situation where they are just literally flushing money down the toilet to reply to your legal letters, which, I mean, sorry, Astralis, but I'm starting to think that might be the way they like to play that game. So could this have also been that thing if ESIC goes, I can't make a tough decision here because, God, we don't want to get into a fight with Astralis and just drain our very small piggy bank?
And by the way, one thing that's actually disturbing to me is if you rewind to what I said at the beginning, this actual situation probably never will happen again, because even if someone exploits the same rule, what are the odds that you get some mad scenario like the agent of the player in question openly says, like we're saying, like wink, wink, he's totally fine. Wink, wink, definitely not ill like a That's not going to be, the difference is next time that part won't be there. So unfortunately, like you're saying, Sam, put it this way, for people like me and Richard Lewis, if that guy doesn't say that, we can't even say that is what happened. We have to then couch what we're saying, like, well, it seems to me like maybe you're not telling the whole truth about the medical status. I then can't myself as a journalist just say that's not true that he's doing that, because I don't know. I'm not someone who is a medical expert who can go and examine the person or know his history and all that. So I actually think the reason why this one particularly causes so much ire is this looks like you caught them with their hand in the cookie jar, a piece of paper in the other hand saying how many cookies I plan to steal, and then you had no money in your pocket to pay for said cookies, and we're going, I think you might be stealing those cookies. And then Astralis goes, can you prove it? And then we have to go to court again, like you say. So no, by the way, that's the other reason why, unfortunately, the other downside is this is also a function of esports being so small, because they all know this. If you follow football right now, everyone is waiting. It could happen this year. It could happen in 5 years. Eventually, Manchester City is going to get all these rulings against them for a bunch of financial shenanigans they've done, right? But it can happen at any time. No one knows. It's just because that's a real thing and these clubs are worth billions, They will see that through. Doesn't matter how many years it takes. Yeah. Could take 3 more years. Eventually, whether anything happens, something will happen. And they've done their due diligence. They've done the whole investigation. The problem in esports we have is this, is realistically, forget even this particular topic. As soon as the next event happens, your interest in it sort of sinks from 99%, we're all super heated, we're all going mad, to like 50%, then the next event. And now, even I don't even like a strike. Now, even I'm on like 5%. It's like, that event was ages. It was in bloody September. And also the program doesn't play for them now. cadiaN does play for them. They were shit anyway. They came out. So sadly, even I don't care as much now. So I also feel like, unfortunately, in esports, you have to pretty much act like really quickly, or everyone's interest and sort of like, I'd say like sort of desire to follow this and track it all the way to the end dies out anyway. That's why I say you've really got to be some weird figure, like some almost like some Batman Punisher-esque figure who just has to see it through till the end. I think if you're not, these cases are all going to die. Like, isn't the real reason why almost everyone thinks those like famous North American match fixing cases will never be done now? It's like, the joke is, unironically, some of those players went and had like whole Hall of Fame Valorant careers in the meantime before the case even got finished. So like, some of them don't even play CS anymore. So that's also something that worries me, is like, I also think you can't, that's why the legal angle's clever, because the legal angle takes years to play out. If you're saying like, I need a decision today, I don't think you're going to get that from BLAST and ESIC. It feels like they're just going to go with the path of least resistance.
Yeah, and ESIC just don't like kind of Sam was talking about, they just don't have the people or the money to be able to like do a big kind of law thing and do it kind of quicker in a way by going kind of this massive legal route, having so many lawyers in the case. They've probably got an incredibly small team. It takes so long to go through all of the different statements and whatnot that, like we said, by the time we got the statement now, it's a month and a bit on from it, that like half the people even forgot about it. So it's kind of like a reminder for them. So this is the issue that I think esports moves way too quickly for this, that like most people are kind of like forgotten about it. I mean, it is even a weird world in which, like, if Bro's trials had gone well, we could have been like, oh, who gives a fuck? He's on Ents now. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? Like, that could have been like an angle here. So it's so odd in the sense that, like, the best way to approach ESIC is to just draw it out for as long as possible, because by that point, the public are no longer interested, and therefore no one really cares what the ruling ends up being. Kind of in a way of like, sort of like Man City, like eventually it will affect them. But, for now, they're still 4 times Premier League champions in a row, and they've won UCL, they won everything under the sun. So if they draw this out for another 2 years, they get another 2 trophies under their belt, and they've still had their era, and then they get hit with the charges. It's like, okay, we've drawn it out, and we've had our high run, and we get punished when we're on the down. Who cares?
The player in all of this that comes out looking the worst, in my eyes now, is ESIC, right? Because it's always sort of like the last one in. So we've kind of, Ne0kai and I kind of went, oh, well, BLAST, we can kind of understand maybe they didn't try hard enough, or they didn't do enough investigation. cadiaN is cadiaN, drama follows him around, so it's fine. Astralis, lol, jokes on them, they didn't qualify for the major. But now we're all like, ESIC must disband, they're absolute shit, look at this mess that they've made. That can't be good for the whole scene, though, because their integrity as a commission is gone after all.
Isn't almost everyone's take ESIC is toothless and doesn't really do it? I don't think so. Coaches think that, players, fans, everyone does, right? Hasn't everyone lost hope?
I think so. Which is why I want Valve to be involved. But obviously, that's never going to happen.
That's a pipe dream right there.
I was about to say, my sweet, sweet summer child. Like, you need to give that up right now.
I know.
Bro, Valve would be like Astralis. I think they won one of our majors one time. Like, which game? Is this TF2 or CS? Oh, so yeah, sure. Interesting. All right.
That's exactly.
That's the thing.
But it brings me full circle back to the conversation I was having. This is not good. Like, they are toothless and they can't do anything, but this is not good, because what it's basically shown us is, if you are match fixing and if you are one of the bad players that are actually doing some serious cheating, you're laughing, because you're like, well, that's good, because this one little body that may have been able to call me out publicly, no one takes serious anyway. So
do you want a solution? I'll give you a solution, but here's the thing, Sam. Like every Thorin solution, it's not a comfortable one, and it's not a pleasant one. It's not the solution you'd pick, but it's the hard choice that has to be made if you actually want truth and justice to win out. Basically, I don't think you can have an ESIC, an independent body that acts legally and it faces. What you need is a sort of like, how do you even describe this? Like a paladin knight character who just, through his virtue, roams the land, solving cases like this. Let's say almost like a sort of sheriff in some ways, who just takes it upon himself to be the judge, jury, and executioner. I nominate Richard Lewis, and I will recreate the soliloquy from the end of The Dark Knight, because the thing is, what we need is a hero Not the one we deserve, but the one we need. Nothing less than a knight shining. And they will hunt him. Oh, yeah, the fans will hunt him. Astralis fans, Astralis org, everyone in the space, they'll hate on him. But the thing is, they'll hunt him, they'll condemn him, they'll set the dogs on him. But that's what needs to happen. Yeah. Because sometimes the truth isn't good enough. Anyway, sometimes people deserve more. Anyway, you get the point. Notice I didn't nominate myself there. I don't want to fucking die for bloody BLAST Astralis. Richard Lewis will do it, though. Get Richard, get him up and tell him, you have to do it again, mate. You know, eventually we're going to have to die for esports anyway. So this is it. Like, if you could just please solve this case and be the Punisher. Thank you.
Well, it's true that with the Toothless stuff, because like, especially like from my side, who spends a lot of my kind of, I say like 80% of the gigs I've done over the last few years have been kind of within the tier 2, within the online space. I would say, so like, for example, like this year, I've worked 55 different events this year, right? So I'd say probably about 40 of them have at least been kind of tier 2 online. I reckon on average, and you can obviously just tell when you're in the game, I reckon I've casted like a match fix game at least once every 2 weeks, right? Where it's just
every 2 weeks, all right.
Well, if you think that I wouldn't, I
mean, if you do enough events,
yeah, exactly. Sure. I probably do like in my throughout the year, like 6 days a week in the peak, of kind of 2 best fees a day, right? But some of these games, you can just tell that people are like, it obviously just looks really sus, right? But the reason why you can see how Toothless are, some people will get away with it. It's obviously a big thing. People getting blacklisted left, right, and center. But then you've also got like the other side where like. I think I brought this up with you, Thorin, we kind of was on Snake and Banter, but there's a guy who was like a relatively prominent figure within tier 2, playing on a bunch of teams. He coached a few as well. Bulgarian guy spy leader who was like very involved for years. I mean, he's been playing since like 2013 and go, right? And more or less every day he posts about, hey guys, I've got all these match fix games, whatever, and he's posting on Twitter, like just go look it up, like spy leader on Twitter, and he just posts about like, these are the match fix games, pay me and I'll whatever, you know what I mean, I'll give you the, and granted,
that Brandon's a bit on the nose there. Named spy leader. He's involved with like match fixing games secretly. All right,
yeah, and granted,
I'd call myself innocent citizen, totally innocent.
Exactly. Legally, there's a very good chance that it could just be bullshit. He's just making it up, which in itself is even funnier.
No, but I know what you mean. I'm pretty sure there have been players before. I know some Asian players have done this, where they have just on social media said like, I was just asked to fix a game. Because some people just come out and said it.
I know so many players. I've seen the DMs of people getting reached out. Especially there was, I can't remember exactly who it was.
By the way, is it the vibe in tier 2 because of these past precedents that they just think, well, we're too small, so ESIC will never come and get us?
Yeah,
because if we're talking about the biggest teams in the world, Astralis and BLAST, but if they're not taking care of that, I assume the assumption on tier 2 and tier 3 is we can do whatever we want here. It's just fucking, just the inmates that took over the asylum, right?
No,
there's no one here.
It's the Wild West in tier 2 because they know ESIC, just don't have the people to be able to like go through. I mean, there is fucking no chance that they are watching like, Unibet League, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there's just no way they're watching like this tier 4 games, which are like getting thrown. So they just don't have the like facilities to be able to kind of punish people. So I think people just like know they can get away with it. But I've seen like, a lot of friends that are in tier 2, and I've even sometimes like tweeted about teams. I remember like I tweeted about one team that was casting, it was like a couple of years ago now. I tweeted about a team. I was like, oh, these guys are pretty sick. Like, I can't believe they're winning against whoever else they were playing. And then I got a message from a friend who was in tier 2. He was like, oh, by the way, the other team are definitely throwing, by the way. And I was like, how'd you know? He's like, well, here's their coach DMing me 2 weeks ago asking me to throw a game. And I was like, oh, sick. Brilliant. So, like, it is just like one of those where you just know it happens. But that's where I think it feels for me that ESIC are actually so toothless, because people, like, they're so obvious. Like, they're like adding people on Steam and messaging them, like an hour before the game, being like, oh, let's collude on this kind of thing. And obviously, thankfully, most of the people I know, I think, or hopefully all of the people I know, most of the time just tell them to fuck off, right? But it is the fact that, like, because they're so open, there's, they're using their name that's on HLTV, whatever, they don't care. Like, they just do not care, because they know they're never going to get punished for this. At the most, they're going to get blacklisted from a few tournaments, but there's 1,000 other tournaments they can go into and fix and kind of get good odds on and work in their favor. So that's for me where I feel like ESIC are toothless, and where it's kind of like you get like two sides of the sword. You get the ESIC that don't do anything or don't do enough, and then you get the ESIC that when they do something, it's not enough. So part of me even feels like now, especially after this Astralis thing, we're at fault. It's all our problem. We had too much faith in ESIC. We believed in them too much, and we actually need to kind of like massively lower the bar and kind of go into every ESIC case expecting the bare minimum, the worst case, and hope that they overachieve. That's like my approach to it now, because like especially when this bro one came forward, like I had this a little bit before. I was saying to a couple of friends of mine, like, I don't really think a lot's going to happen here. And, you know, credit on Astralis, like bringing, credit on BLAST for bringing ESIC in and getting them to like a third party, whatever, you know, they're not involved type thing. I respect them for that. I still don't think anything's going to happen because of how toothless ESIC are. And that's my expectations. When the announcement came up, I didn't quote it to you because I was like, oh, cool. That's what I expected. I expected nothing really to happen. And this makes sense for me because I think that's what I think the issue is that I'm seeing with a lot of people, especially all the like quote retweets on E6 thing, is people are like, oh, this is so harsh. What they're doing. And it's like, this is what they do.
That's what people thought this was too much.
Yeah.
What?
No. People are saying it's not enough, right?
Oh, it's not enough.
Thank goodness for that. Okay. People are saying it's not enough, and I'm saying that's what you should expect, right? Because like, I think we've kind of gone in, and I think even I forget the guy's name, the guy who's like, you know, the spokesperson for ESIC. He's come out a couple of times.
Ian Smith.
That's the one, yeah. And he said like,
you guys should appreciate that name.
And he's come forward, and he said like, we are understaffed.
Imagine that, Sam. Imagine a guy called Ian Smith. He's not really able to, you know, manage this whole big problem now.
But
it's too on the nose, isn't it? It's too on the nose.
At least when he's come forward, he has said, we don't have the facilities. We're understaffed in this sense. So I think people are expecting so much. That's what I think the issue is. I think ultimately we are the problem. We're expecting too much.
Right, here's a shit joke for you. Free shit joke just to lighten the mood at the end. Which is, at the end of the day, though, to run like an independent body that's like an integrity coalition does sound really, really hard. That's not a part I'd like to play.
Fuck. Oh my!
Think about that one. It's a slow burner.
Let it mull over.
Listen, it's a slow burner.
Let it mull over.
It's all good. It's all good. I've ruined it all by bringing up Ian Smith now, but it's all good.
Oh, I can't. I had a last question.
Oh God.
I mean, I think
was it yours, or did you take it off someone on Twitter?
No, I mean, I did actually see my Lord and Savior Fallen, and I agreed with what he said. I mean, he was just like, he was like, ESIC should just disband. That was it.
Okay,
straight up.
Okay.
Sweet and simple.
I actually don't think he's wrong. I think that if they disband this space for another, there is a space for a third party to enter it then.
Yeah.
So accept that you didn't do your job and get out, make space for someone else. But my actual question was going to be, do you think now, after Astralis not qualifying for the major, that the original idea that cadiaN was coming into that team to ruin them from the inside was in fact the truth, and that is exactly what has now happened?
Yes. Do you see that knife attempt when they lost map 1? And he like,
what was that?
Like he's on dust 2, and he's so obviously not even close enough. That's where I was like,
no, it was bad. It was bad.
I was like, secret agent. Like this is brilliant here. That would be the overarching, like, just brilliant. You know, 10 years down the line, when you know we're doing like, I don't know, HTV Awards 15 or whatever, and he's handing out IGL of the year or whatever. He's like, oh, by the way, guys, I was an undercover agent. Like, fucking credit, mate. That's what we want to hear, because like, that's the only thing for me. Like, that would be like the brilliant, like, full circle conclusions. Like, I was doing you guys a favor. You just didn't realize that I took all this shit for you guys.
The real problem, as far as I can tell, is in the Danish scene, they are just way too good at Game of Thrones. Because if you think about it, right, a few years back, Astralis tried to destroy Heroic. Like we said, he got their coach Hunden, like, cheated against you. Then he got punished because of that. Then he sent you the strats, the anti-strats or whatever. Then suddenly he joined your team, and then he worked for you. And then all of a sudden, it's the other way around. Now Heroic has to get their own back. So then what happens is cadiaN sends his heralds down to go and ruin their super team. Then cadiaN joins later, into the whole thing, gets them to force him into the lineup, then goes, my arm doesn't even work, starts knifing people and failing RMRs. At the end, he's like, how do you like me now, Nicola and I? Probably goes into his office on Monday. Can I explain to you how I just fucked your whole RMR up? There you go. It's just a battle. I wish you could just play the game, man, instead of all this crazy vibe. Like, it's insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
The wheels turning wild in the Danish scene.
Yeah. The issue is, though, I think, you know, we kind of touched on it with Fallen's tweet where he said, like, they just need to leave, right? And I agree and disagree. It's the thing with me is like the potential of ESIC is like incredible of what they could do. It's just that they obviously, like, what they have done is just not being good at all. It's just the issue is now that with what they have done, or the limited amounts of what they've done, and people are saying, okay, well, this is, if they can leave, maybe another group can come in and do it. Like, I don't know if anyone...
Who's that going to be, though? Again, I know it's no one's volunteering. It's like me when I said Rich Lewis can be the one to say, I'm not fucking doing it. Like, you know, so if someone else wants to come in, you can, but it's not going to be me.
Exactly. No, who's going to want to do that? Because you've got, like, you know, everything ESIC ever tweet, even whether, like, Counter-Strike...
I'll tell you the saddest thing of all as well, Neil. Here's why you'll never probably get a real ESIC. Yeah. Because unless Valve does it, which I agree would be it's not an unreasonable thing to imagine, the game dev who owns all the IP rights could do some of this stuff. If it's not them, the only way I think you actually could do it is it'd have have to be truly independent. And are you ready? No one's going to like what I'm going to suggest now. That means we all have to fund it. Guess what? If we, the fans and the industry people and the pro players fund this, we can have exactly this org. By the way, it's probably going to take like hundreds of thousands a year, though. People have to do full-time jobs, and you have to have all these bodies to look through documents and do all the research. The downside is, though, we can't get people to pay to watch the bloody game. Never mind pay for an independent body to like investigate people doing dodgy stuff for their roster eligibility. So sadly, like fixing that one's almost like a bigger problem than fixing esports itself, because we're already trying to get any of us to pay for any of this shit, right?
Yeah.
So if we do that, we can fund it. But I don't think anyone's going to.
If there was ever a board that was like going to come in, or like we're thinking about it, I just don't think they'd want to touch like it with like a 10-foot pole, just because of everything you say, whether it's good or bad or positive or negative in any way for ESIC, it's always met with like a barrage of hate, and it must be so tough. Like every time you're like, okay, I think I've done some decent work here, and I've actually come to a conclusion, which is what people have been asking for. Maybe it's a little bit late, but I've finally come to a conclusion, and then it's like either not good enough, or it's not harsh enough, or whatever it is, or not what people would have wanted, right? That's for me where I feel like we're just actually never going to see another board. So you basically got kind of two ways of it. It's like a pick your poison. Do you want no board, or do you want a board that just like the bare minimum, but maybe not even that? And I don't know. I think it's probably, I think people are just kind of saying like, oh, well, we didn't need one back in the day and it's not been that much of a help, so maybe we can go back to that. But potentially, if we didn't have an ESIC, that could make, I would probably say like potentially make teams like Astralis and other bigger ticket kind of organizations be like, okay, well, now there's no one who can punish us.
They'll be empowered to do it more, right?
Yeah, exactly. So at least with like ESIC, it's like not that like, yeah, they're a little bit toothless, but there's still like, they've got like one canine there that can maybe scratch you a little bit, right? So like at least it can like be like a little bit
nip
of a deterrent. Yeah, exactly. See, like a little bit of blood.
See, now this is how I know that you're young, because you're still in that world where you're dating some girl and she's gone out and cheated on you, and you're like, oh, she'll change.
I'm buckling in for this.
I will just keep, she'll change. She's going to change. I just got to give her a chance. And then she just keeps cheating. And then you're going to hit like 28, 29 and realize, actually, she's never going to change. This is what I've got. It's probably better not to have it at all. That's where you're at. You're still at that age where you accept those problems. ESIC needs to disband. It's done. It's got no, it's just got no credibility. That's where I sit. I just want to check, because I don't actually know how this is financed, but I'm under the impression ESIC was financed originally by the TOs putting money in, and then the legitimate gambling companies to try and fight match.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Could be some that.
It was like, I think one of the early ones, they actually have it on their front page. There's a few here on their front page that are like part of it, but I think it was essentially like, it was like the Gambling Commission were like, they're like supporters of like the UK, US, and I think like EU as well. And then there was like a few other actual like betting firms, like, you know, Rivalry and I think like GG Bet and these kind of people who kind of came in and were helping them. There is definitely the argument of like, is that like a weird conflict of interest, having like a gambling company paying like an independent body to then like crack down on gambling in a weird way? Yeah, you know what I mean? It's so odd,
some things they do, yeah.
So I think it's to keep it clean. Like if you're sort of if you're doing this within the legal bounds, match fixing is a problem for you. But my thinking was, surely, because money talks, as Astralis keeps showing us, if you as a group say, okay, we're funding this, so you're going to disband, we'll set up, we'll have this independent group, but kind of like we're paying, so now you're going to have to answer to us, and it's not just on a face value of, oh, look, we support this, but we don't actually care, because that's maybe what's happening. Maybe that is the solution then. Maybe we don't have to finance it, we just have to put some pressure on the people that are financing it.
Well, actually, that's one thing to bring it all the way back, which is why, believe it or not, one of the main things I do think was a stumbling block for ESIC and meant they never properly got up to speed was that supposedly, remember, at the time they launched, I was actually involved with Flashpoint, and I can tell you, we weren't partnered with ESIC. And I believe BLAST at the time maybe also wasn't. I think it was only ESL was at the time.
I think in the early
part. And part of the problem was the other TOs I heard were concerned that like, oh, wait, this was originally funded by ESL. No, it's just a secret ESL proxy, isn't it? So they're just going to use that to fuck with us and like apply regulations that'll make. So unfortunately, some people weren't willing, because by the way, there's another group of people who in theory should be incentivized to want this. Why don't ESL, PGL, BLAST, Starlight, all the big orgs get together? And the reason you would fund this, Again, sadly, there's a conflict of interest, which is at your event, if you pay more, you could say maybe you'll get more preferential treatment. But you imagine you want this person to make the decision you can't make, because as we're saying, the admin guy on the ground in Denmark can't really look, see cadiaN sit down and go, hey, the guy you're replacing probably isn't mentally ill, so I'm going to say that's it. Like, he can't make that decision. In fact, BLAST himself are going to have a hard time. So in a way, you want to outsource this, so why not pay for it? Again, I don't think they will, sadly, but I would be open to something like that. I'd like the idea. Unfortunately, that is just esports in a nutshell, though, where if it's like, wait a minute, this was ever associated with my enemy, though. Nah, I'm not involved then. That's just esports, sadly. People won't pitch in, will they? You know?
Yeah, and it also feels like, as well, it feels like such a big positive if you were like an ESL and a BLAST and all these other TOs to actually kind of heavily invest into this, because even in like the lowest form, if something does go wrong, you could just push all the blame on ESIC. Be like, hey, we're paying these guys to do it. It's their fault they're not doing the job. It's not our fault. And it feels like the perfect, in a way, like scapegoat. If you're ever, in this case, for BLAST, I think, obviously held quite a lot of flack from this. BLAST could, obviously they didn't, but they could have been like, hey, this is like ESIC's thing to soar. Yes. We just accepted this at face value, and we just thought they were being honest. That's maybe a bit naive on us, right? But now it's ESIC's job to say whether this is right or wrong. So go to them, don't go to us, kind of thing. So if
the thing I hate about this, though, is I just hate this vibe that feels like I'm watching some like film noir film from the 40s of some like corrupt gangster guy. And in this analogy, I come along as like the gumshoe cop, and I'm like, I've got your banks right now, Nickel and I. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have your job, punk. And then he like calls the commissioner, and all of a sudden, like, I haven't got that fucking booking anymore. Suddenly he's out on the streets within 2 hours, and him and his shit hot lawyer have got him out. And he's all shit eating grin, like, see you later, Thorin, Detective Thorin. Like, oh, what the fuck, you got away with it again? Not again.
And that is pretty much the story. That is what has happened.
There you go. That's a recreation.
They got away with it, and Thorin and Richard Lewis will still be hated for calling them out.
Yeah, exactly.
On that note, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon for another episode.